Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Camille Santana Considine. I'm this year's graduate student coordinator for Lunch Poems, and it's a pleasure to welcome John Shoptaw for the final Lunch Poems reading of the fall semester. I want to thank everyone who makes Lunch Poems possible, Dr. and Mrs. Tom Colby, the library, particularly Amber and the student workers, the English department, and the dean's office. If you could please take a moment to silence your phones before the reading starts, that would be wonderful. And then we also have Pegasus Books. Pegasus Books over there who will be available to sign books at the end of the reading. Jeffrey G. O'Brien, the director of Lunch Poems, will now introduce John, and while this alert comes in.
That's what everyone just got. Yeah. We were going to hold the reading anyway, but now it's just a regular reading. We're delighted to have John Shoptaw here. He's traveled all the way from Wheeler Hall in Berkeley English to celebrate his new book, Near Earth Object. In an essay called Why Eco-Poetry, John Shoptaw asks, quote, how can an eco-poem usher us into a new environmental imagination without teaching us a tiresome lesson? Later in the essay, Shoptaw uses a quote from an interview with Jory Graham to answer the question. Readers, quote, feel anything remotely political to be polemical and thus didactic. They feel they know this information already, so why do they need it in a poem? That is precisely the point. This is still Graham. They know it. They are not feeling it. That is what activists in the environmental movement are asking of us. Help it be felt, help it be imagined. In his own verse, Shoptaw has dedicated himself to exactly that project, an eco-poetics that avoids the didactic, to let a reader arrive at feelingful knowledge of the non-human world and the disaster of human extraction, rather than re-arrive at already possessed and thus inert fact. In his new book, Near Earth Object, each poem sets out, via a startling array of methods, forms, and lexicons, to give us this unclichéable opportunity to feel what is lost and what is still here, what has already happened and what is going to. We can feel it in the very first poem of the collection, For the Birds. I'm just going to read the beginning of it. For the abundant, along with the rare birds at my feet are of late. For all kinds of birds I've lived with here are turning rarer. For the chestnut-backed chickadee who carries her sunflower chip to the buckthorn to dine on between her toes. For the chickadees once came to my feeder in bunches. For the big, round, plain brown pair of California towhees who eat in parallel from the bird crumb table. For though they crumb it clean without a glance or a cheep, I believe this remote old couple is as entwined as any two polarized photons. The poem is clearly citing Christopher Smart's For I Will Consider My Cat Jeffrey, which he wrote about me, in which every line starts by using for as a coordinating conjunction, while it observes the divine mechanics and behavior of a beloved pet. In Shoptaw's update, we can note the non-divine as early as the ironic title, For the Birds, which balances a dedicatory love for birds with the vernacular phrase expressing something as a waste of time. Shoptaw suggests that any attempt to praise the non-human must confront how little poetry can do to save it via its immaterial technologies of care. Note also the transformations in for's part of speech status in this poem's litany. It moves from preposition to Smart's coordinating conjunction and back, a restless alchemy within the dedicatory word that expresses both a desperation in the face of environmental collapse and the big little pleasures of variation within a composition. Just like for a song means nearly free or cheap, but also indicates what poetry is. It is neither hopeful nor hopeless, but some of each. In such small, humble, fierce choices, Shoptaw attempts to move us, as he puts it at the end of a poem called Wildlife Corridor, quote, toward daylight and the ways only jays know. Please help me welcome Berkeley English's own John Shoptaw.
Thank you, Jeffrey, so much for that introduction, and thank you, Camille, for organizing this series and helping to organize me for my part in it. And yeah, Jeffrey, you couldn't have said something more introductory, more apt to my reading. My goal is to reach readers without preaching to them. And I'm so honored and deeply pleased to read before this audience, which includes friends and poets, young and not so much young, who I've been reading myself for years. And writing in the wake of. So thank you all for coming. For the last half century, North America has lost about a quarter of its bird population. And when I read that shocking story, I wrote this poem Jeffrey referenced for the birds. For the abundant, along with the rare birds at my feeder of late, for all kinds of birds I've lived with here are turning rarer. For the chestnut-backed chickadee who carries her sunflower chip to the buckthorn to dine on between her toes. For the chickadees once came to my feeder in bunches. For the big round plain brown pair of California towhees who eat in parallel from the bird crumb table. For though they crumb it clean, without a glance or a cheep, I believe this remote old couple is as entwined as any two polarized photons. For the fearsome indigo jays, black-hooded and crested, tapper and sly, as I call them. For tapper taps twice on an overhanging plum branch at 2 clucks from my tongue, so I'll know her. For sly hangs back and shrieks me over, and only shows himself after I place on the table their morning quincunx of unsalted peanuts. For he knows Tapper will quack to announce them, and then squawk indignantly when he slyly swoops in for the vast majority. For the dark-eyed juncos, the wide-eyed titmice, the narrow-eyed, red-breasted nuthatches, who feed right side up as they see it, the other birds upside down. For Audubon's, yellow-rumped, Wilson's, and Townsend's warblers, nobody's birds, who feed, drink, and breed as they can. For the song sparrow's song, and the sparrow who exults in singing it. For a song, how long will that phrase mean what it means? For them all, I refill the feeder, even this morning, when all blown down things crack underfoot, and the Diablo wind seems to growl diabolically and scrape from all corners at once against a sky the color of flint. For the lesser goldfinches, symbolically fierce, who part their beaks at any other kind who would peck a chip in their presence. For the pine siskins, their symbolic match, who used to expose their underwings back at them with the dreadful yellow stripe. For 2 years running, no siskins at the feeder. For the brown-crowned, as yet unkindled sparrows, wintering from Oregon and the Farallon Islands, I sing my 2-note welcome, hello, pointless, for they won't learn it with my face masked against wild smoke migrating from the north. For the species too little or big or otherwise unsuited for the feeder. For Anna's hummingbirds who love to suck on our pineapple sage. For the red-tailed hawk perched in the smoke-fogged redwood. For soon it'll be pestered by a twister of crows calling, hawk, 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 hawk. For a red-tailed hawk, I mistook it, something larger, ruffled, molten. For the golden eagle, it turned out to be weird, hunched in the chill. For another flew up out of thick air and followed it south out of eye shot. For those two, not migrants, evacuees clasping their emotional baggage. For the birds, then, what have I to offer? For what kind of refuge is my catalog? For I can't reckon how to make good their losses. For I meant not to make a life list, I meant for others to partake in my pleasure. For it pleases me to look after the birds. This poem, the title poem of my book, Near Earth Object, refers to usually a large object that enters the Earth's gravitational pull, such as the asteroid that 66 million years ago, give or take, struck the Earth and extinguished around 3/4 of lives on the planet, including non-avian dinosaurs. This poem cycles through a number of increasingly far-fetched similes, which I call dissimiles. Unlike the monarch, though the asteroid also slipped quietly from its colony on its annular migration between Jupiter and Mars, enticed maybe by our planetary pollen, as the monarch by my neighbor's slender-leaved milkweed. Unlike it, even when the fragrant Cretaceous atmosphere meteorized the airborne rock, flaring it into what might have looked to the horrid Triceratops like a monarch ovipositing, had the butterfly begun before the period broke off. Not much like the monarch I met when I rushed out the door for the 79, though the sulfurous dust from the meteoric impact off the Yucatan took flight for all corners of the heavens, much the way the next generation of monarchs took wing from the milkweed for their annual migration to the west of the Yucatan, and their unburdened mother took her final flit up my flagstone walkway, froze, and, hurtling downward, impacted my stunned peninsular left foot. Less like the monarch, for all this, the globe-clogging asteroid, than like me, one of my kind, bolting for the bus. This poem is called Poulter's Measures, after a little-known Elizabethan rhyming couplet form that works something like a baker's dozen. We play with our trucks out back in the dirt, where plump red hens peck for bugs, but keep clear of the hackberry stump. Then checkers on linoleum in the kitchen, where Chuck's mom, in a red house dress, turns, "Cornflake fried chicken?" I grew on the wrong side of the rails, but the right side of the river in Missouri. Chuck on the wrong side of both. Verses such as these make poets cousins of poulters, who'd lay 14 eggs every second dozen. Chickens on Earth outnumber humans 2-to-1. Me, she steps out back. I hear a scurry and a thump. A red fact chases me. Chicken comes from chickens. Do I forego lunch? No. I'm starved, and we both love drumsticks. Unlike mass nouns, count nouns can take indefinite articles and plurals. A steer, a lamb, spare-ribbed piglets. In this couplet, I eat my last chicken, the meat newly wrapped for Tompkins Square. California burritos. In Berkeley, the egg line stands motionless. I'm third, behind a woman whose darting looks I don't call bird-like. With her battered empty carton, she hunts and picks through dozens and dozens of prismatic river dog eggs. Time considers passing. I tilt my head and view her soiled carton brimming with shells unfathomably blue. I'm a pescatarian, I tell somebody, studying me through our shaving mirror, with my oddly uneven, hen-fed eye teeth, grown in years ago. We're an unlikely couple, more than one, fewer than two. This poem takes its title from Hitchcock's California-based film. Hitchcock owned a house in the Santa Cruz Mountains near where the redwood scene from Vertigo was filmed, and I wrote this during the horrific 2020 fire season. Madeline drove Scotty down the peninsula and parked her green Jaguar at the sunny brink of the Big Basin redwood forest, which makes its own atmosphere, like a planet, verdant with fog and giddy with oxygen. They enter in silence its dark, cinematic hush and walk among trees grown to a vertiginous height, stopping before a broad sequoia cross-section with dated growth rings. 1066, Battle of Hastings. 1930, tree cut down. 1958, filming of Vertigo floats a little beyond the fibrous red bark, like a vapor. Looking at it feels like looking down into an incredibly deep well that perspective narrows into a funnel. This foreshortening of the historical abyss into the present is what film buffs call the Hitchcock zoom. When the camera backs out and zooms in, or zooms out and closes in, so that viewers suddenly become aware of the scene, impinging on or casting off from its focal character. Usually, it's hard to see the climate for the days, but an unreal weather event, like the dry lightning storm that shook out her hissing coils over a drought-wrung California, sparking a swarm of wildfires overnight that stunned Big Basin down to the granite. That kind of experience will zoom the overlying climate into focus for a moment and bathe us in an icy astonishment, as though the earth looked around and saw it was the only planet swaddled in habitable gases. But nothing can keep on knowing like that. So the days look up and move on. The smoke turns away from the bay, and tomorrow they say the weather will be fine. I reread the Psalms recently, was struck by the nature of the psalmist. Some of these poems, the Psalms I learned influenced the author of the book of Job, and I was thinking not far beneath grief lies grievance. This poem is called a psalm. I'm harping not to your species, Sequoia sempervirens, Titanic, Methuselah, Jurassic, Catcher, keeper of carbon, shawled in fog, but to you, redwood, burled double-trunked one, of your kind somebody propagated in our garden, one of a couple planted near our neighbor's house. I'm vocalizing, not a supplicant, but one bending over backwards in your oxygen shower to placate you with my addresses. Exhalations unheard, but nourishing. I'll never know your canopy up close. like those hummingbirds, thrilling mates with their iridescent plummets, or plucking creamy lichen flakes from your trunks to coat their nests. But I know from down here the dome of your limbs, drooping broadly out from under their overshadowers, then curling sunward. I can't scale you, over 24 of me, but I can shinny my eye up your tannin bark that guards your pulsing sapwood and your heartwood, rot-resistant though it's already dead. Where aren't you? You wedge your little cones into my lug soles, tangle your needle leaves in my hair, leaves that sip fog, seed clouds, and rain on your roots. We low ones measure lengths of time. Over 4 of me around, you with your yearly rings and your shallow, wide-spreading, intertwining, unquenchable roots must measure breadths. You drink at our sage and citrus islands, suck our clay pots, wrap and snap our jointed copper roots, heave our flagstones. Your partner hoisted our neighbor's basement. We were transplants like you when they, at the turn of the century, over coffee in the garden, explained that your mate had to go. By my count, it was my age. What I feel 20 years on when I crawl about its stump to clip another ring of knee-high nursling sprouts, I've been keeping from you, from myself more like. Not a supplicant, I ask you, just to let me know how long I've got. A narrow breath to you, how long till you let me forget and just enjoy you? If there is any just on earth. The cattle egret is the most adaptable bird on the planet. It walks alongside its neighboring animals and often rides on top of them like some strange mythological beast. The word cattle derives from capital, as in per capita or head of cattle. This poem's called Least Concern. Chimerical, the rhinoceros egret, it's keratin dehorned in South Africa and container shipped to Vietnam or China, where it's ground by aphrodisiasts and snorted by affluent boneheads, metamorphs into the hippopotamus egret, the elephant, Cape buffalo, zebra, giraffe, the ostrich, and the camel egret, the deep-domed tortoise, and, in the Americas, the cow heron, or cattle egret. Ranging like wildfire over the last century, a migration prodded by the transmutation of forest into ranches, the cattle egret writhes and champs, and tilts and plods, and darts in cursive at grasshoppers. And where its livestock gets concentrated, decapitated, tenderized, charred, whatever, the Babulcus ibis, or cattleman wader, capitalizing on a field without cattle, reinvents itself as the tractor egret. Though the unattached bird is emblem enough of the other end of extinction, ignition, when not just its shaggy breeding crest and breast plumage go up in flame, but its legs, beak, lores, and irises catch color. And I've seen cattle egrets riding tractors in swampy East Missouri, where I grew up. The Pangolin, a kind of anteater, is the most trafficked animal on the planet. You may know Marianne Moore's poem, The Pangolin. I append a warning to this poem that there are a couple of moments of intense imagery. Pangolin scales. You wrote, Miss Moore, about how the pangolin, streaming at high night from its stone-lipped burrow, trespassing in Belgian Congo moonlight, gibbous as a bell curve from its paginated tail to its sinuous gummed tongue, prolonged for trickling down ant-slickened trunk crevices, would swirl headlong down the impenetrable drain it makes of itself. Melee, penguling, up-rolling thing, an involute, inexplicable globe, plate lapping, overlapping scallop plate. Only now, Miss Moore, I hate to report, it's plucked like a jungle sop fruit with its prehensile stem and handed off to traffickers who parade it into some high-rolling private dining room in Guangdong or in Ho Chi Minh City, where its throats scissor steaming at the upscale table as ardent proof of freshness and gratitude to the client whose stimulates the ritual consummation of the handshake deal. Considered a delicacy, an anthropologically delicate phrase you'd have relished, Miss Moore. But why? Nostalgie de la boue? Or a nostalgia to be bushmeat eaters, minus the mud, in the Wild West of Southeast China, where businessmen mean business. From the black tricorner of my notebook ajar, these armored stanzas gleam expectantly. Yes, Miss Moore, there's more. Olive, tan, and golden brown toenail scales, skinned or worked off living pangolins one by one like artichoke leaves, scales soft at first and milk white on the besotted nursling, riding its mammal's tail like a bath toy, ton, but ton. From Malaysia, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, in luggage, under timber, red bean sacks, bound for West Berkeley Wellness, say, in the mild west of the East Bay, on 7th Street, away from traffic, where maternal practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine, codified by Chairman Mao in the 1950s, invite us over from their homepage window, while visitors positively yelp and, now unsearchable, pangolin scales, cool and salty as the Pacific, are administered to promote menstrual flow and lactation. This book ends with a series of poems called Whoa, that's W-H-O-A, exclamation point, based on Ovid's tale of Phaethon from his Metamorphoses, Phaethon being the son of the sun, S-U-N, who takes the reins of his father's solar chariot for a day with catastrophic consequences. In this poem, I come to the realization that whereas Ovid made up his story, we're living ours. What I'd give for a swig from the Hippocrene, hiding somewhere up on Mount Helicon, where Pegasus sank his hoof and the water bucked, or even a swallow of arrowhead from the San Bernardino Mountains, bottled in clear, recyclable petroleum plastic. The Metamorphoses looks down on its clueless charioteer, while its mountains and rivers unroll in perpetual hexameters serene as a Chinese hand scroll. I'm not up to it. I have no command over my recalcitrant materials, so far beyond my power to remedy or return to their courses that despite my gaining a feel for my rendition, I know I'm also a petrified rider whose classic vehicle is running out of fluids. It's all I can do to follow the circumnavigation to its downfall in my stamping four-horse verses on a long day when it's always noon. In this episode, things have come to such a pass that Mother Earth herself appeals to Jove for help and salvation. It contains some strong language, but hey, Earth is worked up. Sloshing her swollen, amniotic oceans and sucking her streams into her limestone cavities, Earth squinted through her Appalachian range for a glimpse of the sun, shielding her slopes with her broadleaf forest and shuddering all over Oklahoma. She shook up Mexico City, sank back as though building for another upheaval, and groaned with a cavernous vocal fry. Why don't you just electrocute me, high voltage, if you're up there? Then I won't have to watch my own Holocaust. My springs are clogged, so fucked over are my groundwater bowels by fracking hoses. Take a good look. My moist and curly Amazon crotch is plucked and shaved and sown in soybeans and grassy beef feed. My Kentucky coal hills are lobotomized, and coal ash ponds are blinding my lakes and coating my cold freshwater tongues. My seas are bowls of plastic soup. There's an oil rush for my balding pate, and my fuming rump is calving prematurely. If Atlas and the rest of my ice tits are milk dry, if my seams and slicks and farts are ripped out of me, if I lose my tree fur, my water bodies, even my sky blue sorry, if my lovely seasons bark and froth and turn on each other, confounded chaos will grip me for good. Much of what I most want to save is too far gone already. For God's sake, snatch what you can from my denatured zones and knock that sun flare off his high horses. Earth had her say and had her fill of the blasted heat and withdrew into her umbrageous nether parts and waited for Mr. High and Mighty, and waited. Then she rose moistly into her Adirondacks. The peaked sky was unusually clear, nothing but a sullen patch of storm cloud raining its ragged shade on the mountain. Earth snatched a cloud bolt, twirled it by her left ear for balance, and whirled the whizzing lightning fork that ejected the stunned charioteer from the chariot and from his plump white boy's life. And that's how Earth quenched fire with fire. This final poem I have to read to you, and I thank you so much for your attention. I wrote with my favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, in mind. It's called After a Cricket. Hope holds despair as much as despair holds hope. Despair has to keep hope out of mind somewhere, like that fine-toothed strumming I heard over lunch from what couldn't have been a cricket. It was too cold in the fall, too sunny in the day. Hope, hard hope, doesn't tune out but listens through despair for sounds of life. For the foreseeable century, the climate will gleam on us with a fixed gleam that breaks down anywhere at once, as any expression will if it's held too long. Over lunch the next day, I heard the same sound, so I went outdoors and followed the strumming to what, sure enough, was a cricket, running one forewing down the other, somewhere in the noonday shade of the braided wisteria vine in pod. I felt his strumming deepened the shade he basked in, but I knew he wasn't playing for me, or only to please himself. The next day, nothing. So I went out and I listened to a silence in the shape of a strum. The strummer, I like to think, hadn't given out, but met up with an admirer. His hope would have held. He played like it would never have occurred to him to stop before he was done.
If you want to keep hearing more of those poems, Pegasus with Emma is over there, and books are available for purchase, and John will be signing them. Like I said earlier, this is our last reading of the fall semester, but we have a wonderful lineup for the spring. On February 6th, Megan Fernandez will come. On March 6th, Jessica Fisher. And on April 3rd, Jeffrey Davis. All of these dates and information about the events can be found on our website, lunchpoems.berkeley.edu, which also has links to our mailing list, our Twitter, and our Instagram. Thank you so much for coming.